What should we expect per you?
Well, I think a lot of news has leaked out, and it looks pretty clear that what Facebook is going to launch is not a new phone, but basically a layer of software that's going to be visible to a smartphone user when they turn on their phone, sort of like their home screen, and it'll be an announcement with HTC for a specific phone that will have that software installed. I do think it's the beginning of a whole series of Facebook initiatives in mobile that will probably lead ultimately to a lot more people having a home Facebook screen when they turn on their phone all over the world.
And to have something specifically tied to Android, is that because that's where they feel they need to have a larger presence, that they've already dedicated a lot of time to how people experience Facebook, say, on the iPhone?
Well, it's because Apple wouldn't allow them to do it on the iPhone. Android is a more malleable, more open system that allows the phone makers to do different things with it, whereas Apple would never allow Facebook to control the opening experience when you turn on your iPhone unless they had a much tighter relationship than they do today. So there really isn't another choice. Perhaps they could do a similar deal down the road with BlackBerry or somebody, but Android's the logical choice also just because they have the sheer largest number of users on smartphones globally by a substantial margin.
Does this get complicated at all, given that in another arena, Google and Facebook are clearly competitors?
It does. And in fact, one of the things that has occurred to me is that you might long-term see Samsung and Facebook become much closer allies, which we're not seeing tomorrow. It's interesting that the announcement is with HTC, but since Samsung is overwhelmingly the dominant maker of Android phones, and since Samsung and Google are increasingly at loggerheads on a number of matters, and Apple, I mean, I think, you know, basically Samsung is the partner Facebook ought to want to have most closely associated with it, because then they could get real volume and scale. And everybody in the coverage, the pre-announcement coverage, is suggesting that Facebook is going to seek to have a wide variety of other relationships so they can put this so-called home software, which is what it's being called, at least that's reportedly, on as many phones as possible.
But the reason, I guess, that HTC would be ready and willing is just based on
they're
in
trying to come from behind. HTC is way behind Samsung. They'd like to have a more differentiated product. And the thing that people have got to remember is that on almost every smartphone, Facebook is the #1 app that people use. So and this is also a global phenomenon, so don't focus too much on your experience in the United States or what your kid does or anything like that, which so many Americans tend to do. You know, if Facebook is your most common app that you're using, you may very well want to have Facebook turn on the minute you turn on your phone. And from Facebook's point of view, they can begin to have a much larger role in actual calling and messaging, which is the #1 use of phones, even more than the apps. So if Facebook could have their interface be the way you make phone calls to your friends, the way you message them, they can actually have a more significant role in your life and combat a lot of other messaging apps that have been making a lot of headway right now.
David, before we go, we have seen phone manufacturers try deeper integration with Facebook in the past. You've been covering this company for a long time. What do you think they have learned and Mark Zuckerberg has learned from some of those past experiences, especially when it's deep integration with a phone that nobody ends up wanting or buying?
Well, this is the first time Facebook itself has worked with a phone manufacturer that I know of in order to do a substantial integration. Facebook has made enormous improvements in its own mobile apps, but it has not until today worked directly with a phone maker. And I think this is the beginning of a whole new phase of their relationship with mobile, where they are going to work much more closely with the phone makers in order to kind of try to have a much bigger part of your life when you're traveling around using the phone, because Facebook is increasingly a mobile app. In more than 2 to 1 in the United States, people are using the phone, Facebook on mobile more than on a PC desktop. So that is a critical factor in Facebook's future.
Really quickly, is this the kind of development that could change the game on the mobile advertising revenue that Facebook generates? That's
a great question that everybody's asking, and I don't think the answer is clear until we really see what they announce. Obviously, they think it will help. The more prominence they can have in your mobile experience, the more of your time they will have in order to show you ads. They clearly have not cracked the code for mobile ads yet. I think the ads they're currently showing on the mobile feed are quite crummy, and people are frustrated with them. They will work in 1,000 ways to improve that. This just gives them more means to do so.